Today's episode is brought to you by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has manufactured high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com. Hello, and welcome to episode 18 of Situational Awareness Matters radio show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence environments. The SA Matters mission is simple: to help you see the bad things coming and time to avoid bad outcomes. I titled this episode, What I Learned in 2 Minutes. It's an interview with Lieutenant Sean Dolan of the Aurora Fire Department. On January 7th, 2013, Sean, while serving as a firefighter on Engine 7, became a close call survivor when he entered a structure fire at 16562 East Asbury Place, a single-story residential dwelling, confirmed with people trapped inside. Sean and a fellow firefighter made entry through the front door with an 1 3/4 line to provide protection for the truck company crew that was searching for the known victim. As conditions took a turn for the worse, Sean and his partner was caught in the wake of a fast-advancing fire. A mayday was called, and Sean suffered 2nd and 3rd degree burns prior to being pulled to safety by a fellow firefighter. While the entire experience lasted just 2 minutes, Sean had some great advice for others, and he shared some powerful lessons learned, including having a gut feeling, known as intuition, and how he ignored the warning signs of his intuition. He recognized the conditions and what needed to be done, and as he stated, I talked myself out of it. How he felt like he was going to die in the fire, and listened to him describe the feeling of calm that came over him when he felt the end was near. This phenomena was also shared in episode 9 with close call survivor John Wright, as he laid down to die in a structure fire in Flower Mound, Texas. If you haven't listened to that interview, you'll want to go back and do so. Sean mentioned several times during the interview his inherent need to win when fighting a fire, and how his motivation to beat the fire almost cost him his life. He thinks he would have been beneficial to have an officer inside, and he explains why he thinks that might have been a benefit. How he suffered from auditory exclusion, a situational awareness barrier, and how he literally was deaf. He didn't hear any of the radio traffic during the time that he was inside. How training may have been setting him up for failure because the conditions during training exercises are so unrealistic to what firefighters are actually going to face, and how they in training make aggressive interior fire attacks, and how they always win, which, as Sean says, just simply is not reality. How the sense of urgency to get the job done overcame him, and his valuable advice is slow down. How he's applying what he learned from this incident in his new capacity as a company officer, and how he instructs his crews to tell them when they think things are going bad. So let's listen in on the interview with Lieutenant Sean Dolan from the Aurora Fire Department.
My story begins on, I believe it was a Monday, January 7th of 2013. It was first day of our work set, very routine day, normal crew, very good friends. Had a very good friend, paramedic in the back with me. I was riding as a paramedic firefighter on the back of Engine 7 in Aurora, Colorado. And there was nothing unusual about the day. Very routine, normal operations. Actually, I take that back. I was scheduled to act as an engineer that day, and it was our first day with a brand new rig, and I didn't feel like being the first one to ding up the brand new rig. So I switched with our paramedic student, who was actually a promoted engineer. And he took the helm. I took my regular seat on the back of Engine 7, and we went about our day. We were having lunch and joking around like we normally do when we got the call at approximately 12:45 p.m. And as soon as the tones came in, the dispatcher had, she sounded very serious, like this call was for real, and there was no question about it. She said the magic words of heavy smoke and flame from a residence with reports of people trapped inside. So as soon as I was pulling on my boots, something felt different about this call, and I can't say it was a premonition or a gut feeling. Something just felt strange. But we knew we were going to go to work. We saw the smoke column as soon as we turned out of the station. We were first due into our second due area. Our neighboring engine was at training that day. And as we were driving, we got continued reports of multiple callers, persons trapped. And police got on scene. They said they had a burn victim in the front yard with a confirmed report of somebody trapped in the basement. As we turned into the neighborhood, there was a wall of fire coming from the Bravo Charlie corner of a single-story ranch-type residence. So it was heavy fire. The neighbors were screaming. There was a older lady standing in the front yard, and her hair was smoking. It was your really kind of classic type fire scenario that we all prepare ourselves for and see actually very seldom. My officer got out of, my officer, who's a good friend of mine, got out of his position and talked to the woman who'd made it out of the house. Her skin was black with smoke and her hair was smoking, and she said, "My daughter is inside the basement. My adult daughter is trapped inside the basement. I couldn't get her out." Everything that I saw as I exited my position from the rig told me it was a 2.5 fire. I went against my 2.5 line. I went against my instincts and pulled the pre-connect. I figured my officer coming around the front of the rig and my partner coming around the back would expect to see me pulling the pre-connect. And they're good enough that they could adapt to my pulling the 2.5, but I went with the pre-connect. What we call our accepted practices for single-family dwellings tell us pre-connect through the front door is the hose line that we pull. So we got the line stretched in the front yard, and we were masking up. My partner forced the front door. There was heavy, heavy smoke to the floor from the front door. No flame at this point, but we were in a narrow vestibule between the garage and the bedrooms, and what I remember is heat pulsating out the front door in waves, and it was the most incredible heat I'd felt up until that point. And I remember thinking, I don't want to go in this building. And it was the very first time I'd had that thought, had that feeling, and it was the very first time that I felt fear masking up at a front door. The siding was melting, and it was pushing out the front door like smoke coming out of a train. And I recognized it as the black fire, recognized the pulsing heat, all as signs of impending flashover. Academically, I recognized it. And then, again, went against another gut feeling and said, our gear's good, our tactics are good, we're going to push into this, we're going to earn our paychecks today, and it's going to be hot and it's going to be tough work, but we're going to do it. We're trained to win. We're conditioned to win, and there was no reason to think that we weren't going to win this time. The truck captain, who had bypassed me, I didn't see him go by me, came out the front door, and he said, "We're going to the right. The fire's on the left. Are you ready?" And I remember thinking, no, I'm not ready to do this. This is not This is not going to turn out well. But I'm the only one with the gun, so you bet, boss, I'm ready. I'm right behind you. The truck captain and his probationer attempted to belly crawl into the front door to do a primary search, and they couldn't make it. So I opened up on the smoke that was pushing out the front door to try to cool it down for them. They continued to crawl in. We had the nozzle open, and we crawled straight in the front door about 10 feet, and we made a left. It just felt right, so we made the left, and I was hit by this incredible wall of heat that was I don't know, 10 times, 100 times hotter than it was at the door. At first I thought, great, we found it, here it is, and started playing that nozzle for all it's worth, into the ceiling, down low, up high, down low, thinking that we got it. And it continued to swirl around us like a black wash machine. There was zero visibility. It was completely black, and it was one big swirl of darkness and heat that I immediately felt myself burning. And as time was going by, time actually slowed down, and I had time to think weird thoughts like, this is what it was like before they had hoods, even though I'd taken a second to make sure my hood was on because I knew it was going to be incredibly hot, and it was more than I'd ever felt before. It was more pain than I'd ever felt before. I knew that I was burning. I felt like my ears were melting, felt like my gear was melting, and continued to just play that nozzle, every letter of the alphabet, in order to try to cool it down. And I thought, if I can hold on for 10 more seconds, if I can hold on for 5 more seconds, we're going to win. This thing will lay down. And later on, people asked, were you laying on your back, doing the cool thing, spraying the ceiling? And I will not lie, I was curled up into a small little ball, trying to get that water everywhere I could in order to cool it down, only because I knew the truckers were doing a search somewhere to my back. I was aimed toward the Bravo side, and they were searching the Delta side. And I knew that I had to hold on for them, because if I let this fire get past me, it was going to eat them. It was going to eat all of us. It was just, the conditions were absolutely horribly intense. Probably for the first minute or so, I thought, we can beat this. We'll get this. It always dies. And then in that, as that second minute turned, then I thought, well, I think I'm going to die. I think I'm going to die in this fire, and this is it. And then the intensity and everything slowed down, and everything got real peaceful. And I thought, well, if this is the way it's got to be, this is the way it's got to be. I didn't ever predict or think that it was going to end in a fire like this. But here goes, because I decided I wasn't going to leave on account of the truckers making their search. The next thing I knew, I heard my partner calling for me very far away. He seemed very far away, and all I could hear was his voice somewhere in the distance. And he said, "No, Shawnee, I was pressed into the carpet, masked into the carpet, reaching out as far as I could, yelling for you, and I felt the heel of your boot, and you didn't respond, so I thought you were dead." He said, I thought you were laying there at the end of the line dead, because you couldn't have been spraying water. It was so hot in there. I heard him calling for me, thought they needed water over on their rescue, so I tried to move more over to the Delta side to cover the truckers who I thought they were bringing somebody out. As I turned from Bravo to Charlie, that's when the fire rolled over my head. It was the first flame I saw, and all the smoke lit up like, it looked Hollywood, and it was incredibly scary. I hit it, just like the books say, it went away. That was quite relieving. And the next thing I knew, I went mask to mask with somebody who I thought it was my partner, And even under these conditions, I think I started making poor decisions because I remember saying, you need to get me more lines so I can get further into this room and knock this thing out. Whoever it was, it turned out to be the truck captain, grabbed my pack straps, turned me and threw me toward the door. As later on I found out my partner pulled the line from the front door. The nozzle slipped out from under my arm. I kind of saw the nozzle go under my arm and thought, game over. I've got no weapon. It is too hot, and now I see the door, I'm out. So went crawling for the door. The next in engine lieutenant drugged me the rest of the way and threw me into it was basically landscaping material right at the front door. And I remember feeling as if I got thrown into a cold lake. It was January, moderate temperatures. The weather was a nice sunny day, but it felt like going from a hot day into a cold lake. The temperature difference was that significant. At that point, I was still conscious. I couldn't see. All I could hear were voices, and I couldn't see anything, which I thought, wow, this is surreal. I can't see. I don't know what happened, but I can't see. All I could hear were swear words and cuss words. I recognized all the voices around me, and later I was told that the swear words were from the guys burning their fingers trying to get my mask and helmet and gear off, because they said the rings on my mask were glowing cherry red, and they couldn't get my mask off. The reason I couldn't see was my mask was charred over. The face piece was intact. The actual lens was charred and covered in goo from a burnt radio cord. The other thing that didn't happen is they didn't spray me with water. They said my bunker gear was smoking, and one of the guys had a backup nozzle, and he said, no, I'm not spraying him with water to cook him. So they got my gear off me, stood me up. I was told I fell against the wall and had to be helped to the front driveway. I don't remember that part. And I do remember them saying, or I remember myself saying, grab me a bottle of water, we're going back in. And they said, no, you're burnt, you're going to the hospital. And we had an argument there in the front driveway, and for the first time I got to experience what it's like for some of our patients when we forcibly sit them down on the stretcher and put them in the ambulance, because that's what happened to me. My lieutenant, who's also a paramedic, got in the back of the ambulance, as did my partner, and we were off the scene before I could argue any further. It was surreal being patient. It was surreal having a non-rebreather placed over my face and myself breathing down the bag, the non-rebreather not being able to keep up with the rate I was breathing at. And I remember my lieutenant, who was starting an IV, looked up at my partner, who was standing behind me on the phone with the hospital, and he said, Jason, sit down, you're going to become a patient. My partner, Jason, said, no, we're going to take care of Shawnee. And he said, no, Jason, sit down, you're a patient now, your ears are dripping. You're getting skin all over the phone, you're going to become a patient. So at that point I realized we were probably burnt pretty badly, but I still didn't know how severe it was. So to go back a little bit, that's the part of the story that I remember. Some of the lessons learned from the incident were there was a little bit of a miscommunication at the door about who was in command. The truck captain, being second due by policy, should have taken command, and the engine officer, my officer, should have been inside with us. However, there was a mix-up at the door. the truck captain wanted to be on the primary search with his probationer, and so my lieutenant became command outside. I don't blame my lieutenant for anything that happened. I never have and I never will. However, as an officer now, as a promoted officer now, almost 2 years later, I believe that having an officer inside is necessary to make the decisions about when conditions are too intense and too harsh to actually continue operations. And had an officer's eyes and mind been in there with us to balance the nozzle firefighter's mind and goals, I don't think we would have been in those conditions nearly as long. The other communication problem that we had was the victim, who was trapped in the basement in survivable conditions, was actually removed by the real hero of the story, the garbage man, who happened to be driving by the fire, saw what was going on, stopped his truck, ran across the front yard, saw the lady's hand coming from the window well of the basement, and popped her out of a basement window just prior to us stretching the line. So it was almost the comedic, she was coming out as we were going in, and we didn't even see her. So we were under the impression that she was still trapped in the basement. And that's why we were in offensive operations under intense conditions.
What side of the house was she pulled out on?
She was pulled out on the Alpha side at the Delta corner. So she was on the same side that we were, but the house kind of jutted out. So where we were actually masking up, there was a wall there that we weren't able to see what was going on that side. And to be honest with you, being so focused, I don't know that I would have seen it anyway. I remember seeing a garbage truck there, but I didn't see any of the actual rescue.
Was there anybody who physically would have been in a position to be able to see it, notwithstanding the fact that they might have been, fixated on the job that needed to be done? Do you think, what I'm getting at is, do you think there was anybody who might have actually seen that happen, but it didn't really compute to them what they were seeing?
I can't answer that with accuracy. I'm not sure what position my officer was in order to see it or not. I do know that he asked some more questions, found out that everybody had been confirmed removed at about the time we were entering the front door. And he aired that it was confirmed everybody was out of the house. He accidentally aired it on the wrong channel. So it didn't come over my radio initially, and I, like I said, I put my gear on real tight because I knew it was going to be a tough firefight. I turned my radio way up, but I didn't hear any radio communications. I think it goes back to once that adrenaline starts pumping in the fight or flight, when your hearing becomes less and your vision becomes less and you become focused only on the fight that you're in. I didn't hear any radio transmissions throughout the incident. The other, I don't think it was a miscommunication, but kind of a weird thing that happens every fire, and we notice that it happens, and I don't think the fire service has come up with a good way to deal with it yet, is the two personnel from the truck was split, 2 on the inside and 2 on the outside. The truck captain and the probationer, who were doing the primary search, entered, and we entered behind them. We went different directions. They got pushed to the floor, and the truck captain, who's very experienced, said, this is a no-go situation. We're not going to be able to make this search. It's too hot. He started kicking his probationer to back out, and they were able to belly crawl back out the front door. As the truck captain was actually was reversing, he ran into my partner, who thought the captain thought it was his partner and didn't communicate that they were backing out because he assumed that she knew what the plan was. Who he backed into was actually my partner coming in with the hose line. They disentangled themselves as often happens at the front door, "Get out of my way, get out of my way." They disentangled themselves. The truck crew went out. The engine crew went in. And we thought that they were still inside. We thought they were still inside, and I was determined to not let the fire get them. The truck captain, once he came out, saw the hose line going through the front door and said, "Oh man, those guys are still in there under those conditions." He crawled up the hose line, threw my partner out the door, went 10 feet further, and grabbed me. That's when I went mask to mask with somebody who I didn't know who it was exactly. And the next thing I knew, I was crawling out the door. So there were calls from Aurora to Minnesota, where I'm from, about why did they leave Shawnee inside. And for the record, nobody left Shawnee inside by himself. It was one of those things where communication is nearly impossible. And once everybody realized what was going on, somebody came back to make sure that I got out safely. So nobody from my crew or the truck crew left at any time. We were working together. We were working in what we thought was a very coordinated fashion. Unfortunately, because of, it's almost become cliche, fog of war, we weren't able to communicate as well as we had hoped to. So I was in there for longer than I needed to be, but not because anybody left.
Question for you, Sean.
Yes, sir.
From the time you went in, crossed the threshold, took the hose line, went in, turned to the left, until your captain pulled you out, in context, I know you didn't know at the time how much time had passed, but now you've had some time to reflect and learn more about the incident. How long were you in there?
Initially, I guessed it was 5 minutes, and the battalion chief, who eventually became the incident commander, he guessed it to be closer to 2. From the time that it was estimated that we made entry to the time that the actual mayday was called, was approximately 2 minutes. And in that 2 minutes, my helmet was charred, my hood was burnt beyond being able to come back in service. Our health and safety officer said there was biological contamination inside my hood from my ears. There's imprints like a rubbing from the Vietnam Memorial Wall of my ears on both sides of my hood. And I received mostly second-degree burns to my ears, face, neck, hands, first-degree burns to my arms, upper arms, second-degree to my shoulder, and on my thumbs, where my gloves were in place, third-degree burns, where the nozzle was kind of raised up into the heat. And I'm guessing my hands were the highest portion of my body during most of the incident. Again, I was conscious the whole time, remember most everything, and felt an intense amount of pain initially in the hospital. It felt like a sunburn. And then fortunately for me, I was out 7 weeks, but fortunately for me, there was no pain. After that first day, I felt no pain with no pain medications ever administered. It was a very, very fortunate and I guess I would say lucky recovery that it was quite an easy recovery, besides keeping everything clean and my wife changing dressings throughout the whole ordeal. It was a pretty easy recovery.
Sean, you had mentioned there was a mayday called. Who called the mayday?
The mayday was called by the second due engine lieutenant, who he and his crew were stretching a second line to the front door in order to back us up. and there was a report of firefighter trapped inside. I don't know how that came about. I don't think it came over the air. But he thought there was somebody trapped inside. He saw me crawling out. He described it. I was crawling on my elbows. He described it like the Terminator. He grabbed me and pulled me out because he thought I was moving too slow and wanted me out of the way so that they could make a rescue of somebody who was trapped inside. He pulled me out, saw that my bunker gear was smoking. He said I was reaching for my head, realized that it was me who was hurt, and called the mayday for firefighter down. There wasn't actually anybody trapped. I was never trapped. And the mayday incident was actually over before it started. We've had a lot of mayday training, a lot of rapid intervention training, and he hit the button for the mayday, I think, out of instinct, and got everybody rolling, got everybody in that mode. But actually, it was kind of over before it started. Incidentally, we call him Rick, Rapid Intervention Crew, was stopped by police cars who were blocking the nearest intersection to the block that the fire was on. And I have to give a big shout out for everybody who was on scene. But the Rick crew actually got up to speed and was going to ram the police cars once they heard the mayday. They were going to ram their way through the police cars, and at the last minute, an officer was running toward his car, and they squealed the brakes to stop right before the police cars. They moved the cars. By the time the truck got up to the scene, the mayday was over and everybody was accounted for. But I think that's a very profound way to show how we care for each other. And that was a big thank you on my part.
Yeah. Sean, what would be the, if you were dispatched to a residential dwelling fire in Aurora, what would be the first alarm response? What kind of apparatus and staffing did you have responding to this call?
Apparatus is 2 engines with 4 people apiece, a working truck company with 4, a second truck company as the RIC, the Rapid Intervention Crew, 2 battalion chiefs, and an ambulance is the first alarm assignment. This fire had rigs out of position and rigs coming back from hospitals, and actually had, I want to say, 2 more engines added themselves in a self-dispatch, which is not quite per policy. We happened to have 2 engines coming in this situation. It was fortunate to have more hands on scene because of the multiple reports of people trapped and the smoke column that could be seen from all over the city. The fire was pretty intense. It got a head start because it started from a cigarette can on the outside finished porch, made its way up into the attic prior to breaching the slider and coming into the house. So it ran the entire attic, is what Arson said, and then it came into the house. Before anybody realized what was happening, the 2 ladies were sleeping inside, and the first 911 call was from a person walking on the bike path on the Charlie side of the house. So the fire had quite a head start on us, and like I said, we were first due into our second due area, so it was winging by the time we got there.
Okay, we're going to take a brief break from our interview with Sean Dolan, lieutenant from the Aurora Fire Department, as he talks about his close call event, so I can tell you how you can attend a Situational Awareness Matters live event, or if you can't attend a live event, how you could sign up for the online academy. If you're interested in attending a live event, you can check out the Situational Awareness Matters tour stop schedule at samatters.com. Click on the Program and Keynotes tab below the header, then click on the Events Schedule tab. If I'm in your area, I hope you'll consider attending a live event. If you're not able to attend a live event, consider signing up for the SA Matters Online Academy. The Academy contains videos and articles that cover the same content as the 3-day live tour event. delivered in 14 modules that you can go through at your own pace from your own computer. The Academy Plus version includes 4 books that are referenced throughout the Academy. The Plus version is a great bargain because the tuition simply covers the costs of the books, making the Academy free. Just click on the link below the header on the SA Matters homepage titled Online Academy. Okay, let's resume our interview with Lieutenant Sean Dolan of the Aurora Fire Department, where he talks about what I learned in 2 minutes. Sean, on January 7th, 2013, was serving as a firefighter on Engine 7 and became a close call survivor when he entered a structure fire at 16562 East Asbury Place, a single-story residential dwelling fire with people trapped. And Sean got himself in a bad spot and suffered from 2nd and 3rd degree burns. So let's continue our interview with Sean. Was there anything about this incident that surprised you or caught you off guard or happened that was unexpected for you?
Yes, the conditions. The conditions definitely caught me off guard. The intensity of the conditions, even though we train for flashover, backdraft, smoke explosion, significant intense fire conditions, I think we train for them in academics only, and our actual training in concrete buildings with controlled pallet and hay fires don't prepare us for those conditions. It also conditions us to win. When we go into a concrete building for a hay and pallet fire, we always put it out, and we always win, and we always come out and high five and talk about what a good job we did. This fire didn't allow us to do that, and that caught me very unprepared, where we walked up and water and testosterone was not enough to control this fire or even tame it long enough to complete a rescue operation. That was very, very surprising to me. The heat caught me off guard. I've never felt heat like that before. I was gonna say one more thing. I think our communication as a crew, where I'm not a shoulder swaggering firefighter, and I'm definitely not a melted helmet kind of wearing firefighter. But I thought we were a pretty sharp crew, and we were the crew that doesn't have to say anything, and we know what each other's thinking, we know what each other's doing, and we know everything that's going on about each other. I thought we were pretty good, and we were. In this case, the lack of communication, the lack of talking, the lack of meeting and coming up with a game plan together caught me off guard, and we went about our jobs the way that we normally do, and the way that we normally do just wasn't enough. It wasn't enough ammo, and we didn't bring a big enough gun to this fire. Now, would a 2.5 have made a difference? I don't think the 2.5 would have kept us from being burned and kept us from being potentially in this flashover situation, or near flashover situation, I should say. However, thinking differently and attacking it differently and coming up with a different game plan for a different situation, I think is a really, really important tool to keep in our toolbox. As is wearing our gear properly. All my bunker gear was in place. Every piece of the ensemble was in place. However, I was wearing it kind of the cool style, with the ear flaps up into my helmet and my collar down. And I was wearing it out of comfort. Nobody likes the flaps touching your ears, and nobody likes the collar up around your neck and your chin. I would say that having those two very subtle but important pieces in place, flaps down and collar up, would not have prevented every injury, but would have lessened it to a significant degree. As it was, the gear that was in place saved my life. It was new trial gear from Globe. When the survey came around, how do I like my gear? I had all good things to say about it because it saved my life. And the bunker gear is still in service to this day. But I would say that take a minute to put the flaps down, take a minute to put the collar up, wear your gear as it's meant to be worn, because it makes a huge difference in that very soft spot that we have around our necks and our ears.
Sean, you had said when you first arrived that you looked at that fire and thought, this is not a fire that we should go into. And then, the captain, said, we're going to go in and search. You guys go in and attack. Did you share with the captain your concern, or did you think about sharing with the captain your concern or your observations about that maybe this should be a defensive fire? What were you thinking at that point when you were conflicted with what you were seeing is a no-go, and the captain is saying, come on, let's go?
I had just completed the lieutenant's exam at the time, been through what we call officer development, and had done all the things that you do to prepare for a lieutenant's exam. My academics and instincts said this was a no-go situation. However, the circumstances said to me that we have to go. This is what we get paid for. We're the fire department. We're the only people who can make this happen. For me personally, my expectations of the fire department in the area that I live, if my family's inside, I'd expect the same thing. However, academically, and the things that I've learned said this isn't gonna work. I didn't share my feelings because at the door it didn't seem like the forum to do it. We didn't have the time. We didn't have the ability to communicate through masks. The smoke was heavy. The heat was heavy. And our organization, the fire service in general, says when the officers say we're going to go, we're going to go. And it was almost like, not having been in the military, it was almost like the helicopter lands or the doors to the armored vehicle open and you go charging out, and that's how it works. Lesson learned now currently as an officer, not blaming the officers that were in charge that day. I tell my crew, if they feel that it's a no-go, I want that shared with me. I want them to communicate that with me. I want them to feel that they can communicate that with me without any repercussions, and that we can come up with a plan together in how to adapt to this situation. In any situation, fire, violent situation, anything that they feel this is not going to work, we need to come up with another plan. At the time, as a firefighter, I didn't feel like it was my place to say one way or the other. Like I said, I was the only one that was armed, and I was an integral piece of making it happen, and I was determined to step up to the plate and make it happen. I think we're conditioned to do that. Mm-hmm. I think that our training, if we think back to fire academies, one of the things that everybody hears in the fire academy is go, 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 go. We force the pretend door on the concrete building, and we bring the 1 3/4 go, 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 go into that fire in a pan and spread. And we do that over and over and over and over and over again. And I don't think that training does justice to the conditions that we're seeing now. I don't blame Aurora Fire Training. I don't blame St. Paul Fire Training from the department that I started with. I think that that's how the fire service trains. And we train to win, because if we didn't tell our people that they're the best and they're going to win, I don't think there'd be as many people who want to do this job. But I think we as a fire service need to really reevaluate how we train, because we talk about recognizing conditions such as these in the classroom, but we don't train our people what to do when we see these conditions. We don't train them how to react. We don't give them additional game plans when they see these conditions, and we don't give them permission to execute different game plans when they see these conditions. I think that we're a go-go kind of culture, and we talked about no, but we don't know what to do when it's a no-go situation.
Before this fire, did you realize what you're saying now? I mean, did you know it before the fire, or was it this fire that gave you the revelation that, wow, there was a void along the way in my training, and you were trained by two different departments, and your departments are not unique. This is happening in a lot of places. I have a whole program called Training for Failure, talking exactly about these things that you're talking about. Did you realize before the fire that this had happened?
No, this fire was a key piece in my training to be a company officer. I firmly believe that it's not even a silver lining. This was a very positive experience for me. The getting burned and going through the recovery was a positive experience, emotionally and spiritually, and critical incident stress debriefing wise. But the fire was a positive experience in officer training. I learned more in 2 minutes of being burned in a fire than all the fire academies and all the classes that I've ever taken. Before, like I said, we're invincible. We're the fire department, and we're the heroes. Now I realize that we're not that. We're just as prone to mistakes, and we're just as prone to injury, and we need to actively make decisions to prevent injury and prevent tragedy. Where this fire has brought me has matured me a lot. It's not a game anymore. It's not a fun time on the fire truck. I mean, it is fun. The job is still fun. I still love coming to work, but we're not here to play firemen anymore. It's serious business, and we need to take it seriously, because we never know when we're going to be faced with this situation. In those 2 minutes, I learned the limit of where we can be inside of a structure fire. And those conditions, if I recognize those conditions again, we need to come up with a different game plan. We can still do our jobs, and we can still protect lives, but we need to do it differently, and we need to do it smarter, and we need to do it in a more mature way than we've done it in the past. Again, not blaming anybody, but we've been trained by the past generation to fight fire in the now generation of environments and of buildings. And because those tactics are not sufficient for the environments, we can't bring these tactics to the environments that we're in today. It's not sufficient. It will still work in certain situations, and we need to keep it in our toolbox. The aggressive interior attack, in my mind, should never die. It should never go away. However, we need to be trained to know when it's an appropriate tactic, and when the transitional attack is an appropriate tactic, or a defensive attack, or, as my chief, who just interrupted us, calls it the aggressive exterior attack in order to, I think the buzzword now is to reset the fire in order to buy us time to get in there and do what we need to do. Those tactics also need to be put in the toolbox, and we need to know when it's appropriate to use those tactics and not be afraid to use those tactics to their effectiveness. One of my good friends who I've worked with for the past 5 years was actually on vacation that day. Should have been driving us, was on vacation that day, and wasn't there at the fire. And he's one of those crusty old engineer guys that doesn't care if he goes to another fire ever again. But he came home from vacation and he said, Shawnee, we're the generation that's going to need to relearn how to fight these fires. Again, not blaming the last generation for how they trained us, because they trained us the way they knew how to fight fire. Now today, the environment's changed, and we need to, like you said, relearn to fight these fires, and to include some of these other things in our toolbox. If I had it to do over again, we would still make the search. We would still enter that front door. However, I would bring a bigger line, bring a bigger gun, and we talk about the lack of maneuverability with the 2.5. In this situation, the 2.5 would have only needed to make it about 2 or 3 feet into the front door, where I could have planted myself before the bedroom hallway and sat on the hose and made sure the fire didn't come down the hallway long enough for the truckers to make their search, make the rescue, and come out, whether they found anybody or not. We didn't have to go after that fire. We needed to protect the truckers long enough for them to make their search. VES would have been a great tactic to use. The aggressive interior attack on this particular fire was not the right tool to use, even though our accepted practices said so. I think our written policies and practices need to change in order to be more versatile and adaptable to the different situations that we're seeing now that's being presented by the environments fueled by the plastics. Mm-hmm.
Now, Sean, you said when you arrived, you look at that fire and you said, this is a 2.5 inch hose line fire. It's a big fire. We need some big water, but yet you pulled the little line. And I'd like to understand a little bit more about what might have compelled you. This ties back to training too. This is part of the training for failure, because we always pull the little line at the burn building, and we always find success with the little line at the burn building. We always pull the little line at house fires and always find success with the little lines at the house fire. You looked at this fire, you said, this is a big line fire, and you pulled the little line. What were you thinking?
I'll take responsibility for the line selection. I won't put that off on anybody else. I will take full responsibility for what decision was made as far as the weapon that we chose. It all goes back to training. It all goes back to conditioning, and it goes back to policy and practice, where our accepted practice states that for residential fire, 1 3/4 lines through the front door. That's what's been drilled into us, both in policy and in practice. However, I think now, looking back on it, that needs to change. It needs to change, and it needs to be different. Like I said, more versatile and more adaptable. What was I thinking? I went against my gut instinct for the purposes of speed, for the purposes of maneuverability, for the purposes of meeting expectations is not the right phrase, but like I said, it was what the crew expected to see as they came around their respective sides of the engine. Because like I said, we were so good, we didn't need to communicate with each other. they know Shawnee's going to be pulling that pre-connect off the side, and they need to fall in line and do what they need to do to get that pre-connect in service. Mm-hmm. That's why I did it, because of conditioning, because of training, because of it's cliche in the fire service, because it's what we always do. I liken it to a police officer going into a bank or an active shooter situation with his handgun, leaving his rifle in the car. We needed to bring the rifle, and after this fire, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to get the rifle out and use it when it's appropriate to use it.
Has your department changed some of their philosophies, policies, training methodologies as a result of what happened to you?
Policies, no. But it seems like the 2.5 is coming out a lot more than it ever has before. So philosophically, amongst company officers and even amongst battalion chiefs, I think the 2.5 is deployed a lot more than it ever was. But nobody has come out and written anything down that said you will pull the 2.5 in these situations. But I think that people have realized what we've always done is not always sufficient.
Mm-hmm. Now, was a 360 done at this fire?
The true 360 was not completed because of fencing and fire conditions.
Okay. If they could have completed a 360, do you think it would have changed anything as far as tactics or building better situational awareness?
It would have increased situational awareness, and it may have built a better understanding of fire, thus different tactics. However, in moments that we were entering the front door, those that I guess you call it an IAP, an incident action plan, would not have been formulated quick enough to stop us from entering the front door. And because the conditions were so intense, it wouldn't have prevented the injuries that were incurred, because they happened immediately. So I guess my answer to your question is yes and no. On paper and in a officer's exam scenario, seeing that Charlie side definitely would have enhanced the decision-making tactics that would have led to a sound incident action plan. However, I don't think that would have happened quick enough to prevent the injuries, because, like I said, we were so good. We were fast enough to get that line in service, and in the front door, and that's how we measured our performance and our quality. Another lesson learned that has been, excuse the pun, burned into my mind is that we need to slow down. We need to take a little bit more time to do things correctly and get a good idea of what is actually going on in these situations before we commit to them. So fast is not a measure of quality, but I think let me say that again. Speed is not a measure of performance, but the quality of your decisions and how you execute those decisions should be our performance measures.
That's good advice. It's this sense of urgency when we arrive, especially if you have a report of a victim, can really push us into quick action without really taking the time to figure out what the best action is, because we've got to get it done. We've got a victim, and many times I've talked with firefighters who've been drawn into taking action based on urgency, only later on to say, if I would have just, did a 10 count and just took 10 seconds just to look around and gather information, I probably would have done something different or approached this in a different way than I did. But urgency had them so gripped that they rushed in to a situation that later on they regretted.
I would agree. Speed kills in these cases. The lessons are still coming out of this thing. Trust me. It will continue to be a part of my career for forever.
Well, Sean, thank you for giving me the gift of your time today and sharing. It takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there and share with the fire service the things that happen when there's a close call. All too many times a firefighter who has a close call, they feel embarrassed, or they feel like I don't want to be criticized, or somebody will think I'm not a good firefighter because I had a close call or I had a mayday. It takes a lot of courage to have a close call and then to stand up and say, yeah, I had one, and now I want everybody to learn from what happened to me. And you had a very, very powerful message, and thank you for sharing that with me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. I think this was these were kind of atypical conditions in very typical circumstances. It could happen to any of us at any time. And I think that's where the biggest lesson is, that none of us are immune, and any of us could see this situation today.
Well, that's it. Episode 18 is complete. Thank you, Lieutenant Sean Dolan from the Aurora Fire Department, for sharing your close call experience and the valuable lessons that you shared with us today. And thank you, the listener, for sharing some of your valuable time with us today. I sincerely appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. If you've experienced or witnessed a near miss and would like to be interviewed on this show, visit my companion site, closecallsurvivor.com, and click on the Contact Us link. Thank you in advance for sharing your lessons so that others may live. If you like the show, please go to iTunes and search for SA Matters Radio and subscribe to the podcast and leave your feedback and a 5-star review. This will help others find the show. You can also sign up for the free SA Matters monthly newsletter by visiting samatters.com and clicking on the red box on the right side of the homepage. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.